Thank you, Aisha. Guys, when it comes to cake, I don't know, maybe there will be like 1%. It's not like there's a registered fact, but I just saw people love cake. I love cake too. And believe me, I think nowadays people now say, okay, they want the healthy version. I don't know how real it is or not, but I mean, I'm not the expert. That's why we have experts. And you know me, I'm very curious when we have experts in the house. Right now, I have Rosevalene Uzoma with me in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Now, why am I saying she's an expert? Yeah, a registered dietitian and nutritionist. I'm going to have to ask you, because when you hear dietitian, nutritionist, people just assume it's the same thing. The same thing. I mean, but is there a difference? Is it the same thing? What makes it different?
Okay, the reason for the registered dietitian nutritionist is, I'll start with the nutritionist. The nutritionist is a graduate who has just finished with a BSc in school and wants to practice because he or she has that first knowledge from the university. But when you become a licensed dietitian nutritionist, is that you've gone through the 4 walls of a training, a 1-year training, which is called an internship in a medical setup. We go to the hospitals and you write exams and you pass. Then you get in, and that means you are a professional who is certified for this purpose. A nutritionist cannot play the role of a dietitian. So that's the difference between it. But the nutritionists now, we say they are fresheners, but these ones are the major experts, the dietitians.
Wow, that's really cool. You know, sometimes you just hear and then you don't know. You just assume,
sure.
I mean, it's in the same world, it must be the same thing.
No.
And then, whether we like it or not, it's been ages. People say, oh, you are what you eat.
Yes.
And then when you're talking about, oh, I need this dog, my body, they're like, oh, you are what you eat. Yeah. How true is this?
And you know, the funny thing the internet has done is that they'll show a picture of a fat person and coin it with different, the fat person is eating pizza and the rest, and the slim person has only what? Well, that is true. The science has made it clear that when we eat food, whatever we eat reflects in our body, because it is what your body desires. That's why they call it the calorie requirement of it. But that's the energy the body requires on its own for it to utilize food, the intake and the output. Now, where there is no equilibrium, there's no balance in what the body takes in, you tend to feed more. And that is why when you feed more, it certainly will reflect in your body. If it does not reflect in your body, you know, just the other type of people, they say eat and grow tiny. Yeah, those ones now have this disadvantage because it hides in their organs. You're slim and you don't know what's happening internally. Those organs are suffering what the adipose tissue should burn down. That is where the fat stores are. Now the person is beginning to blow. You know, at the end of the day, you see that there's this malfunction of one organ or the other because this person is just slim, and at the same time, the person is suffering because this person now has gone dwelling on foods that are not healthy. You're not seeing yourself as being fat. The fat person cannot, I'm giving you an instance now, the fat person cannot go to a restaurant or an eatery and look for a bucket of ice cream and you're carrying it really home. That's the difference. But a slim person does that comfortably.
Yeah.
But you forget to know that there are too many things that are added to the ice cream. The ice cream is just the name. The different food ingredients that are used to produce these ice creams is what increases the calories of those ice creams we take in, and that's why it becomes dangerous. But because that person is slim, person continues with such lifestyle. Well, the other person who is fat now knows there are two things. It's either I am dwelling on my food cravings, I have so much craving for a particular type of food, and that is why I cannot control myself, or that person dwells more on monotonous dieting. You repeat a particular type of meal.
Yeah.
It comes, you know, twice in a week, once in a day, like that. You're feeding and feeding, and you go out of proportion where you cannot control yourself anymore. And therefore, you cannot balance. Your physical activity level slows down while your intake increases.
Okay, now I'm going to mention this because you mentioned, okay, people take this now, two sides of the coin.
Yes.
But at the same time, you realize that though you're saying, okay, eat healthy, don't dwell on this, but people, you get to a point in your life, sometimes you find people say, oh, I'm lactose intolerant, I'm gluten intolerant, and so many other things. If this happens, like you're just sampling food, like normally, guys, shouldn't we just be eating, like eat food? We're trying to be healthy here. But you find out that this is happening to you, what are you supposed to do about it?
Okay, a lot of people have that challenge: lactose intolerance, gluten intolerance. I just want us to know that what the lactose itself is a type of carbohydrate. That is what people should understand. And when you are having this lactose intolerance, it means that the body is finding it difficult to break down the sugar in this milk. And it's not just about the milk. It happens in some other foods. Like we have this part of carbohydrate that are so hard for them to release itself to the bloodstream, which are the cellulose type of carbohydrates. You find them in beans. So when you take this milk, because the body is taking time to release them, you see that there's this peristaltic movement in the stomach. The person is beginning to be uncomfortable. Some, little dance steps is happening in the stomach. And the next thing is either the person is having a bloated stomach or there is flatulence. So in situations as that, it's not necessarily that you must go back to your milk, because you don't need to separate yourself from. If you stop taking milk, what is the next alternative? There must be an alternative to your milk.
Yes.
There are other food options in the same protein group. Like we are looking out for, if you're excluding milk, what other option are you using to replace milk? There's soybean. You can also take soybean. If you don't want soybean, you can go for your cocoa tea, or as well you can take your tea blank or your distinct blank, and make sure that even if you're taking your bread, you inculcate them with your vegetable. What we are trying to look out for is that as long as you are pinning your foods from our 5 different groups, from the food groups, if you're taking the cereals, you're taking the legume group, the meat, the vegetables, the fruits, make sure that for every meal you have, they are all represented. What people do is, because of the said 5 groups, somebody is cooking a meal that has all the whole
Balanced diet.
and they plate. And that's why we now have to change it from being balanced diet. It's no longer about, we're going to use balanced diet, we use adequate diet.
Okay.
Because we say, even if you're doing such, make sure if I'm using my egg, what percentage of egg am I getting in my food?
Okay.
Rice, stew, all of those things are representing one food group. Because in your stew, you added oil while cooking.
Definitely.
There is fish. The jelly oil from fish is also fat.
Yes.
You have your beans representing the legume product. You have your rice representing the carbohydrate. So you have already balanced it on its own, like we say. It's adequate enough. The proportion is enough for a person.
Wow,
but when we separate them and say, okay, I want to make it adequate. I am eating rice this morning. Now in the afternoon, make sure that you cook soup for me. Put meat, put pomo.
So it's basically like adequate and not just a mix and match like people think.
Yes, it's not, because
I'm sorry to cut you, but I have to ask you this. Because when I looked at the theme, I was like, wow, this is a mouthful, although very lovely. Our actions are our future: better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life. I mean, World Food Day. This is a day, October 16th, that UN, will commemorate food and all that, and then of course healthy living. But how would it, because you mentioned all these things now, what we think personally, at least majority of people still think this way, and thank you for the correction, by the way. But how would this translate to the real life, real people?
All right. I love the theme for this year because I think they found out that when it concerns food, there's more of talks and less of action, and inculcating all that matter when it comes to food, from the production. Let me refer to them as the production team now, where you have the farmers, the manufacturers, down to the household owners. How do you make all of these things play a good role in giving us good nutrition and giving us better life? Now we come down to the farmers now, who grow their crops. They grow their crops and they sell out. They don't keep for themselves. There is non-sustainable for the family. And they still go back to the market to get those meals they have cultivated. And in doing that, it becomes expensive for them. And they now see it as, this is big man food. While they have the first-hand advantage because they grew this farm. Then for the manufacturers now, we can't separate ourselves as Africans and as an Nigeria from patronizing the processed food. But my plea with them is, when you produce this food, how do you fortify this food? What a lot of them do is they do supplementation more. when you supplement, you just add only a nutrient to it. You cannot just be supplementing with vitamin A, vitamin K. What happens to other foods? If we keep using the micronutrient, the major nutrient, which is the macronutrient, where you have the carbohydrate, protein, and fat, is excluded in the food that you are supplementing.
True.
But when you fortify, you are covering both the energy-giving foods and the protecting, defending foods for the individuals who will consume it. So in such situations, when they fortify, you find out that when you read the labels of this processed food, you're satisfied within yourself. You're reading carbohydrates of this content, fat is of this content. In all, you total the calories. You are like, okay, I'm taking something healthy.
So what you're saying now, it's not just like the end user. It comes from the very beginning.
Yes.
It's like a holistic approach at the end of the day.
Sure.
I wish you could go on because I'm learning I'm learning a lot. But we're out of time. Time just flies. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you.
The program still continues, and our next feature is You Are What You Eat. And Charles Azanua is on standby. Don't go anywhere.